Okay, so one of the other things that I mentioned was templates. And templates are managed, again, administratively through the administration menu. You go to templates and you can see all of the different templates defined on the device. This default template is the global default that applies to everything in the tool. Anything that doesn't have templates explicitly turned off will have the default template applied to it, regardless of any other settings. So again, this is a good place to put in very general things like authentication credentials, if they're the same on everything, or maybe general service checks like device polling status, or a basic host alert contact, and some very general kind of high level thresholds you want to make sure get set on those devices. Once I've done that, I can go in on individual and create my own templates for different levels of the tool. And you can see here where they're applied. So in this case, an IIS server template to make sure I get a web check on the IIS servers might be applied at the subtype level, whereas like my default settings for remote routers might be set at the type level, or a default for all my Windows systems that sets up basic service monitoring might be at the type level. And then more specific settings can be dialed in at the site or the category level. To edit a template, you just have to click the edit button and it'll allow you to go in here and create whatever credentials that you want that are sort of general to the system. So this is your login information, your SNMP information. If there's additional passwords or SNMP v3 in there, you can kind of configure all that in the template at the template level. And then you can also do things like set who the host alert is for this particular systems. These host alerts will be added onto any host alerts that are inherited from other levels of template. But every contact can only be set as a host alert at one escalation threshold. So the escalation threshold tells OmniCenter how long to wait before notifying this particular individual when some device goes down that has it associated with it. So an escalation threshold of 1 means you're going to get the first notification that goes out for that host. If I set it to 2, I'm only going to get notified for that host if the host stays down long enough for the re-notify interval to expire. So if I go in here, for example, and I look at a device that has a template set for it, for example, when I go into the edit menu, there's an alerting tab here. And the alerting tab is where all of the service checks are configured. It's also where you would see the re-notification interval for this host. So if I add, for example, a contact to a host at a higher level, like I say, OpsCenter is level 2, and add that, basically what it's telling it is when this device goes down, it's going to notify the help desk because they have an escalation tier of 1. If it stays down and unacknowledged for the entire re-notification interval, which here defaults to 1440 minutes, which is 24 hours, if it stays down for that length of time, it's going to send out another notification that's going to go out to anybody who's got a 1 or a 2. So the help desk will get notified again, and the ops center will get notified. That's how escalation works. So if I put in multiple levels of escalation, it'll just progress through that list until someone acknowledges the problem or the problem actually resolves itself. The other thing you'll notice in these setting screens is sometimes you'll see these padlocks. The padlocks will tell you that this setting is coming from a template. And if you mouse over it, it'll tell you what template it comes from. It means that you can't edit this setting unless you go and change it in the template because the template is controlling it. So there are 2 ways to modify something that's controlled by a template. 1, go modify the template. And if I click on this, it'll take me directly to that template so I can make that change if I have permissions. The second way is under the Advanced tab for the device, there is an option for Use Templates. And if I turn templates off for a device, it will keep all of the settings that it currently has. So even the ones that came from templates will still be on the device. But I will now be able to edit those settings for this device. So if I need to, turn a particular threshold off on a group of devices, I could turn templates off on those devices. Or if there's several of them, I might create a new template that turns that off and then assign that template to those devices. So there's kind of multiple ways to do that, but turning off the templates for a device will detach it from all of the templates. The downside to doing that, of course, is that then if you make changes to the templates, they will not automatically propagate to devices where templates have been disconnected like this. So if I'm using the templates to centralize my configuration, you want to think carefully before turning templates off for a particular device. The other interesting setting here. If I look at the main page of device administration, you'll see here the device type and subtypes that are associated with it. Anytime a device isn't behaving like you think it should in OmniCenter, something's not working. Configuration management doesn't work on it for some reason and it should, or you're not getting the stats that you think you should. Always check to make sure that the device type and subtypes are set correctly, because again, that's how OmniCenter figures out what it is to monitor on this device and what methods to use to get that data. So if that's wrong, almost everything else is not going to be working properly. You may get some overlap where some of the stats may be collecting because they're using common collection points for the data, but always check the device type and make sure it's set correct if something's not behaving correctly. You can also from here change category, site. You can assign a device specific template to the device if you want to, but you can also look to see where all the templates come from on this device. So if I click this icon next to template, it'll show me that this particular device has the default template applied to it and a type template unique to the type that it is, called remote routers. So that's where all the settings are coming from. If I set a device specific template, it would add another layer to that device. The next two switches, poll device and host and service alarms, control what OmniCenter is doing to the device. So if I turn off polling, that's going to stop all performance data collection on this device. I might want to do that, for example, if I know the device doesn't respond to data collection attempts, or if it's a device I don't control but I need to monitor. So if it's something that I want to be able to ping but I don't necessarily have full access to it, you might turn off device polling but leave the host and service monitoring on so that you can actually get alerts when the device goes down, even if you can't collect stats from it. If you turn off both host service alarms and device polling, the device no longer consumes a license in OmniCenter, but we won't do any monitoring or data collection on that device. It will, however, retain the history for anything that was collected. So if you need to be able to, go back in and look at what was on an old device, but you don't want to, it's down, it's gone, it's not coming back, you could turn both of those off and retain the history for the device, even though it's no longer consuming licenses, as opposed to deleting the device, which would remove the history as well. Also on the device admin page, you have a setting for thresholds. If you need to be able to edit thresholds on a per device basis as opposed to doing them through the template, you can do it here. And you can actually see that some of these are coming from templates, others are actually accessible on the device. So I can edit this template or edit this setting directly on the device, or I can even disable it. If I disable a threshold, it will retain the settings that I had, but it will no longer use that threshold for that particular interface. So it basically switches off the threshold, but it doesn't remove the settings for it. If I need to create a new threshold for something that doesn't have a threshold created, you'll see it up here in the list of add thresholds. So if there's some statistics on the device that are not being alarmed on at all and are not set up in any template, you'll see them in that add threshold device box and you'll be able to add them there. Thresholds and alarms do not have to be edited on a per device basis. You've always got global ways to do that, either through templates or by going into the administration menu and making mass changes. So if I go into the change devices menu, I've got the ability to go turn thresholds on and off on multiple devices at once. If I go to the alerting menu, you can actually set up host alerts or service checks or thresholds on multiple devices simultaneously. So instead of going in one device at a time to edit them, I can go in and pick multiple devices from this list. This is a real-time search of all of the different columns here. So if I wanted to look just for my Windows devices, I could filter that out and it would filter by type. I can pick one or more of them off the list or pick all of them if I like, and then Go is going to take me to a screen that allows me to pick which thresholds I want to set on these devices. So I can go in here and pick any of the different thresholds that might conceivably apply to these devices for, disk I/O, disk operations, whatever it is. I also have the option to enter a filter criteria. So if I only want to be able to set this, for example, on C drives, I could set a description to match of C, and it would look for only the drives that match that particular criteria when I go to configure the thresholds. So here I can see, here's the ones that match that, and I can pick them off the list here, the ones I want it to apply to, and then set all of my threshold parameters. Now you'll notice in the global changes, These all default to no change. And the idea is that you can use this to modify an existing threshold. So I can go and just update that threshold only where it exists, but not create new ones. Or I can also create new thresholds if none exist on that particular statistic. And then I would populate whichever ones that I want to for my high water mark or my low water mark or time period, all of the different settings I can populate on these devices. And actually, I can go in here and set, 1,000 operations per second, 1,500 operations per second, whatever the numbers are that I want. Set the time period to something appropriate. Set a contact if I want to optionally. Pick a statistical category. So statistical category is where this threshold shows up. So basically, when an alarm goes off for this threshold, which column does it light up on my at a glance or my tactical pages? And it'll actually tell me, oh, okay, so this is disk related, so it's going to show up under my disk related thresholds, basically. I can set any of those different parameters that I need and then create those thresholds, and it'll, create the thresholds on those devices as appropriate. So if I don't want to use templates for some reason, or I want to make a mass change to devices, I can easily do it this way. If I make changes using this tool, however, and I make changes to things that the templates are controlling, the templates will overwrite those settings on the next device discovery. So device discovery can be done manually. It can be done on a schedule. It can also be done automatically if OmniCenter detects like a configuration change on the device, or if it detects that the device is rebooted, it'll automatically initiate a discovery poll. At the discovery poll, all of the templates will be reapplied to that device and all of my settings would be lost. So keep that in mind when making changes, is that you probably want to make sure you're doing it through the templates if the statistic is controlled via the templates.